Hello, everybody. Welcome back to What the Flicks, What the Fright. It is October. We are talking about some of the best horror movies of the 21st century so far, and we are joined now by Dread Central's Staci Layne Wilson. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, and hello, everybody.
I'm such a big fan of Staci, so I'm super excited to talk movies with her, and we're going to talk about one of the most acclaimed horror movies of the century, one of the only horror movies to be nominated for Best Picture. Tell us a little bit about Black Swan.
Well, Black Swan is directed by Darren Aronofsky, and it is about a ballerina who wants to be absolutely perfect, but as we know, perfection can hurt sometimes.
Let's take a look.
I had the craziest dream last night about a girl who was turned into a swan, but her prince falls for the wrong girl and she kills herself. He promised to feature me more this season.
Well, he should. You've been there long enough.
Is someone's hot for teacher? I don't want to talk about that.
You really need to relax.
It's the role, isn't it? It's all this pressure. I knew it'd be too much. I knew it.
Ow, what's she doing here? He made me your alternate.
The only person standing in your way is you.
Sweet girl. Sweet girl.
What happened to my sweet girl?
She's gone!
So, Black Swan is one of those horror movies that is so rich and is so psychologically real that I know some people who are uncomfortable calling it a horror movie.
Yeah, well, it does have, I mean, it has so many elements that we can all relate to in some way because Nina, who's played by Natalie Portman, she does want to be perfect. She wants to be the very best she can be, and yet she's getting kind of different input from her mother, her very overbearing mother, played by Barbara Hershey.
Yeah.
And then her, her sort of ballerina troupe who are, trying to pull her in a different direction. And the director of the, the Swan Lake ballet, who's telling her to just let go, and she can't let go because she wants perfection. So I think we can all kind of relate to wanting to be the best we can be and getting different kinds of input. However, we don't take it to the extreme that Nina does.
Well, I think that's an interesting observation that Aronofsky's film has about the artistic community, whether it's the ballet or film or writing or whatever, that the kind of people who are great artists are not always necessarily psychologically equipped to do all of the socializing and to handle all of the stresses that come outside of the actual art itself. Just the dealing with powerful personalities and letting the way it affects her is overpowering. And Aronofsky visualizes her just descent into, well, madness.
Right.
Over just incredibly, I think.
And then it's also sort of a look at femininity, being the little girl who her mother, wants her to be, the director wants her to be, the Black Swan, which is the, sort of wild woman, and she's kind of in that gap between the two worlds, and she doesn't quite know how to straddle it.
As she differentiates between the two. It's not just, I need to be more confident or more comfortable with my sensuality. She turns it into an other, and then that other completely takes over, and she's no longer entirely sure what's really happening and what's not. And at the end of the film, you're left somewhat to decide for yourself how much of what she's experiencing is a hallucination and how much is real. She may be a murderer, she may not.
Yeah, I think that was pretty smart on Aronofsky's part to do that. And the way he presents it is there's a very like horror movie kind of feel to it in a lot of ways, with a lot of suspense leading up to this explosion of horror. But it's psychological horror.
I was always very impressed with the way he filmed this movie, because when you think about the ballet, you think about gloss and grandeur, and the color palette is very drained. I would even describe some of the cinematography as intentionally somewhat hazy. It just feels like the back hallway, never on stage.
Right.
It's never glorious. It's actually just kind of workaday and sad.
Well, I'm a big fan of autobiographies and biographies on people from all walks of life. So I have read a few. I read Baryshnikov's, and I've read some other ballet stars' accounts of their lives, and it's really, really brutal. I mean, the pain and the agony that they go through. And the film Black Swan does show some of that, like with her toes cracking. I mean, that's just painful when she's on point, and you can hear like the bones and the cartilage
Yeah.
grinding.
There's a trope in screenwriting that I've heard called the sort of the half man. In a horror movie, it's the person who has experienced something terrible before the movie even begins, and we see through how destroyed they are, how battered they are, just how dangerous this journey will be for our hero. And I feel like that's Winona Ryder's character. She is a prima ballerina, but she is very damaged. She is very on edge the entire time, and as she's being pushed aside to make room for Nina, Nina is also kind of getting a glimpse of her own future. Because they do look somewhat similar, I think. In a lot of ways.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, and also Mila Kunis, who plays Lily, the rival who wants to be, in the Black Swan. I mean, she really embodies that, and that's who Nina kind of projects her own self-image into. So yeah, these three women. Although Winona Ryder has a lesser role in it as Beth.
Yeah,
so,
I just think it's notable for
but
what she represents.
Definitely, yeah. I think that was smart, actually, not to show too many other characters. It really does focus.
What are your opinions on how this film relates to, I'm sure you've heard, Perfect Blue? Satoshi Kon's Perfect Blue.
I have not.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. No, it's fine. I think it's
okay.
interesting. So there's a movie called Perfect Blue directed by Satoshi Kon. It's an anime film came out in the late 90s. And Darren Aronofsky acquired the rights to Perfect Blue so that he could use one sequence from it and adapt it into Requiem for a Dream.
Oh, okay.
And there are certain parallels with Black Swan. They're both about artists who are pushed to the brink of sanity and the walls between reality and madness come sort of crashing together. And he maintains that they're not it's not a direct adaptation, but I do think that they're an interesting double feature, and I would encourage anyone who loves Black Swan also to check out Perfect Blue, which I think is one of the best horror movies of the 1990s. But this movie won Natalie Portman an Academy Award, and honestly, yeah. She's so damn good in this movie.
Yeah.
She is punished and she is punishing. She is dangerous and she is frail. And I honestly can't say enough good words about her performance in this movie. And it makes you think about how many other great horror performances really should have been acknowledged, I think, by the Academy. And it's a shame this is such a rare occurrence.
That's true. Yeah, and she's definitely the White Swan and the Black Swan in this movie. She really does capture both of those. And yeah, I mean, there have been some amazing performances in horror films. I mean, even some independent horror films that you only see at festivals that don't have a snowball's chance to get any kind of nomination. So, but I think that's a testament to, what we were talking about earlier, an artist striving for perfection, or what our version of perfection is. And I'm really glad that actors still do take pride in their roles in horror films that are, not Friday the 13th, though.
Well, they can still be good, but the other question I want to bring up before we go is that, again, some people think that if a horror movie is good enough, it kind of ceases to be a horror movie. And I think Black Swan is one of those films that really knock people off their socks, and they treat it as like a psychological drama. And this is a terrifying story about a woman pushed over the edge. Well,
it is. I mean, but then again, so is, I think you feel like when you're going back to possible influences, The Red Shoes, the Powell Pressburger movie. So, I mean, Pressman. So that is, I feel like she was also driven to dance and dance and dance until she didn't have any feet left, basically. So, I mean, that was, that's also a template. And then you feel like it's also, Black Swan itself is sort of a template for Mother. In fact, I noticed a lot of the same tracking shots following the central female character, in both movies.
Darren Aronofsky is one of those filmmakers who I feel like he's kind of hard to pin down. He kind of makes, Requiem for a Dream feels horrifying as well. Pi is a science fiction film, but it's horrifying. Right. Noah has some really creepy sequences in it as well. It turns into this weird, stuck in an isolated area with a maniac bit, but on the ark. He really it seems like he's absorbed elements of the horror genre and he just applies them wherever he wants. And I think he gets away with it. I think it's so cool.
Totally, yeah, and he's so respected in, that's why his films are nominated for Oscars, which thankfully, hopefully will elevate the rest of them to get some more recognition. But of course, they were saying that about Silence of the Lambs ages ago.
And that
didn't really open the door, but...
Remember when Sigourney Weaver was nominated for Best Actress for Aliens? What? Everyone should be, whatever. It's a pet peeve, and hopefully, you know, we talked about a schlocky one last week, but hopefully we can sort of remind people that the horror genre is here. It's always been here, and if you know where to look, it's always been great.
Oh yeah, I mean, no, there's a place for schlock too. I love Friday the 13th, but you know, I don't see any Academy Awards coming its way.
It's a shame. We need an Academy Award worthy.
I don't know. They're probably remaking it again, so there might be a chance.
There you go. Let's make it happen. On our What the Flick scale, 1 to 10, what do you give Black Swan?
I would give Black Swan, well, as a horror film, I would probably only give it about a 7 because I feel like it really does encompass so many different genres. But as a film itself, let's go with a 9.
Yeah.
Is there any such thing as a perfect 10?
I don't know if there is,
so.
and if there is, it's really rare. It's really rarefied.
Yeah.
I'll also give it a 9. I think it's
Okay.
it's totally straight. I think it does really ride that line between absolutely terrifying and just sort of intellectually fascinating and emotionally
and like I said, relatable. I think that's where the horror comes in, when we can relate to what people are going through.
All right, well, everybody, thank you so much. We'll be back tomorrow with Staci, talking about another of the best horror movies of the 21st century so far, so stick around.